Welcome to the podcast, everyone. Today we're diving into these 7 life lessons from folks who reinvented themselves after 50. It's amazing how these stories show that late transformation isn't just possible, it's powerful.
Absolutely. It's like when life throws you a curveball past 50, and instead of ducking, you swing back even harder, right?
Exactly. Take the story of the restaurant owner, uh, a 70-year-old who lost everything during the pandemic. His house, savings, business, all gone in a week. But then, in a truly gutsy move, rather than hoarding what little he had, he gave his employees their due and then flipped the script by building an online business that now earns him more than his old restaurant ever did.
Yep. Wow. That really challenges the stereotype that once you hit 50, your life's set in stone. But, um, don't you think choosing to pay his employees despite his own financial ruin might seem reckless to some?
It does sound counterintuitive at first, right? But that's exactly the point. This is about what psychologists refer to as post traumatic growth. When you're pushed to your limits, you find strengths you never knew existed. Losing everything forced him to take a risk that paid off bigger than he ever expected.
Mm. And it makes you wonder, what about the people we call success stories who are trapped by their very achievements? There's that concept of golden handcuffs.
Right, there was that powerful narrative of the 60-year-old hospital director. She had it all: a high salary, prestige, respect, yet felt utterly empty. It wasn't money, it's like, the external success wasn't feeding her soul. Instead, by volunteering at a free clinic, she rediscovered the joy that had been missing from her life.
Absolutely. That contrast between financial security versus emotional fulfillment really hits home. I mean, you might ask, isn't it a luxury to leave a secure job? It is, but then it shows that sometimes the bravest move is to disappoint conventional expectations of success.
Exactly. It's like trading the shiny golden handcuffs for a key to your true self. And yet, another story pushes this idea further: the 80-year-old woman who was diagnosed with early dementia. Instead of letting that limit her, she started a podcast that became her most meaningful work, even helping
Yep.
other families facing dementia.
Right. That really embodies the paradox of constraint. Limitations forcing us to unleash creativity. It's like, um, sometimes our greatest weaknesses morph into our greatest strengths. Isn't that wild?
Definitely. And speaking of transformation, there's also the story of that 55-year-old man who lost his entire retirement fund to a scam. Most might see that as a final failure, but he, instead, used his setback to educate others. His experience turned him into someone others could rely on for guidance on avoiding similar financial traps.
Exactly. It seems like the recurring theme here is resilience, seeing what seems like an end actually as a beginning. But isn't it a bit too optimistic in some cases? I mean, not everyone manages to turn pain into such pure purpose.
That's a fair critique. Not every setback ends in a breakthrough. However, the research points out something called failure immunity. People who have survived their worst case scenarios tend to develop a kind of resilience that makes future risks less intimidating. It's almost like they have a built in buffer against fear.
Right. And then there's the story of liberation through loss. The 62-year-old woman whose 20-year marriage ended with a single phone call. Rather than falling apart, she found freedom in rediscovering who she really is, leaving behind compromises and learning to live authentically.
Yes, and that's a great illustration of the authenticity paradox. It's almost ironic. The worst news can sometimes be the perfect catalyst for the best changes in our lives. Sometimes an ending is just a new
Yeah,
beginning
totally.
waiting in disguise. And oh, let's not forget the spirited story of the 75-year-old who became the oldest graduate in her university's history. Instead of getting defensive about her age, she embraced the growth mindset, learned with passion, and earned the support of even the younger students.
Absolutely. It's a powerful reminder that learning really has no expiration date. Exactly. It really shows that embracing challenges with a curious mind and a willingness to learn can break so many stereotypes about aging.
Mm-hmm. Most of these stories share one core insight that extreme adversity, or even the brink of what we think is a final failure, can reset our perspective. It reminds us that every crisis also brings a choice to respond with growth rather than falling into safety.
Yes, indeed. And that idea of seizing control despite uncontrollable circumstances is captured perfectly by the phrase growth over safety. It's, deciding to take a brave step forward rather than clinging to the familiar, even if it's unfulfilling.
Exactly, and that's so crucial. The common thread in these transformations is the simple yet bold decision to take a risk, responding differently to things we don't control, whether it's trading security for authenticity or letting limitations drive innovation. These individuals made choices that defied the common narrative about aging.
It's like they were turning their supposed failures into the very foundations of their new lives. Even when all seemed lost, they saw possibilities where others only saw misfortune.
Right, and it's really striking how these stories also highlight that reinvention isn't about possessing some magical power. It all boils down to using what you have, the experiences, lessons, resilience, as currency to forge a new path.
Yep.
And speaking of currency, the idea that wisdom is your greatest asset resonates deeply. Years of experience, instead of being a burden, become fuel for strategic risk taking. It's like the accumulated lessons are what empower you to see opportunities where others might see only obstacles.
Absolutely. And I love that they challenge the notion that major change is only for the young. Life's not about a strict timeline, right? It's about the evolution of self at any stage.
Exactly. And this whole framework is built on a psychological foundation too. Terms like post traumatic growth, failure immunity, and mortality salience. When you face severe setbacks, these concepts suggest that you can emerge not just intact, but actually stronger and more resilient than ever before.
Right on. However, there's one point I want to challenge a bit. Sometimes these narratives seem to imply that every kind of trauma or loss is beneficial if you look at it the right way. What about the ones who struggle endlessly and never find that turning point?
That's a valid concern. Not every experience leads to an immediate breakthrough, and there's a reality to the pain that some continue to endure. But the idea here isn't to diminish the hardship, it's to highlight that when and if one does find the inner strength, the narrative can change. It's more about possibility than
Absolutely.
prescription.
Understood. It's inspiring yet realistic in acknowledging that transformation requires a deep, personal choice and sometimes a lot of time.
Right, and then we also see the concept of the authenticity paradox in relationships. It speaks to the way we sometimes live someone else's life, seeking approval, making compromises. When a crisis, like the end of a long marriage, shatters that facade, it can actually allow us to rediscover our authentic selves and set genuine boundaries.
That really cuts deep. It definitely does. I mean, it's so relatable. Many of us have, at one point, felt trapped by the expectations others have placed on us.
Exactly, and that's where the idea of never too late comes in. These stories, whether it's reinventing a career, embracing a new passion, or rediscovering personal joy, all boil down to one remarkable point. Your age isn't a barrier, it's your
Right
advantage.
on. It's almost like each setback provides you with a kind of roadmap to what truly matters. And by reframing these setbacks as setups for comebacks, you're able to move past what once held you back.
Absolutely, and the research backs this up. Post traumatic growth explains that facing adversity enables us to discover unknown inner strengths. It's not about denying pain, but using it as a catalyst for unprecedented personal development.
Mm. And the practical takeaway seems to be um, ask yourself the key question: what would you do if you knew you couldn't fail? Not because failure is absent, but because you're now immune to the sting of past mistakes.
Right, that's the essence. It's about seeing failure as feedback rather than finality. By evaluating our so called failures, we can often find that they've prepared us in unique ways, qualities and experiences that no easy win could ever teach us.
Exactly.
And then there's the concept of mortality salience, where the awareness of our mortality actually teaches us to truly live. Think of that guy who was working 80-hour weeks, almost missing out on life's precious moments, and then completely reprioritized around relationships and experiences.
Absolutely, that really makes you pause and reflect. It almost turns conventional wisdom upside down. Instead of living life as a checklist of achievements, you learn to cherish each day as a gift.
Exactly. And in that process, you discover that the true measure of success isn't climbing the corporate ladder or having a perfect external image. It's about inner fulfillment and authentic relationships. Each life lesson here is a roadmap to that realization.
So true. I also appreciate how these lessons encourage us to stop waiting for permission to change. It's like they say, stop waiting. The transformation starts now, regardless of age.
Yes, precisely. They remind us that while the world might expect you to stick to a certain script as you age, what really matters is rewriting that script, using your experiences as the raw materials for your next chapter.
Right. And it's not about having unlimited resources. It's about courage over comfort, growth over safety, and authenticity over approval. These are universal decisions anyone can make at any point.
Exactly. Simple decisions that collectively lead to extraordinary transformations. It's inspiring to think how each setback, if viewed through the right lens, can be the very stepping stone to a more fulfilling
Absolutely.
life.
I guess the takeaway is that our age, our failures, even our most challenging moments aren't marks of defeat, but symbols of potential. They're the proof that we can always reinvent ourselves.
Right, and that's the empowering essence of these 7 life lessons. They show us that by choosing courage, growth, and authenticity, you not only overcome adversity, you redefine what it means to live a full, meaningful life.
Absolutely, yes. So, for anyone feeling trapped by their circumstances or by age, remember, it's never too late to break free and shape your life story into something innovative and truly your own.
Exactly. Your transformation begins with that one brave decision, and it can lead to a life that feels rich and deeply rewarding. Thanks for joining me in this conversation today.
Thanks for having me. It's been a powerful discussion on turning setbacks into setups for growth.